Chapter 1. The birthday realization. Craig Nichols had never been the kind of man to keep score. Life wasn't a game and relationships weren't competitions. At least, that's what he told himself every time his girlfriend forgot something important. He believed in letting people be who they were, even if that meant they weren't exactly who he needed. It was easier that way. Less drama. Less disappointment. But as he sat on his couch a month after his 34th birthday, scrolling through the photos his sister had posted from the party, Craig felt something shift. It wasn't anger. It wasn't heartbreak. It was something quieter, heavier, like the sound of a door closing in the distance. The party had been great. His friends showed up, his family laughed too loudly, and his nephew spilled soda on his new jeans. It was the kind of night Craig loved, warm, messy, full of people who cared enough to be there. And yet, in every photo, there was an empty space where his girlfriend should have been. He swiped past a picture of his mom hugging him, her smile wide and proud. The next photo showed his best friend, Tyler, holding up a ridiculous "Happy Birthday, Old Man" banner. Then came the group shot. Everyone crammed together, grinning like they just won the lottery. The comments underneath were a chorus of good wishes. "Looks like a blast. Wish I could have been there. Happy birthday, Craig." And then, buried halfway down the thread, a comment that made his stomach tighten. "Wait, it was your birthday?" Her profile picture stared back at him. His girlfriend, Jenna, with her perfect hair and that practiced smile she used for selfies. The words were casual, almost playful, but Craig knew better. He could hear the confusion behind them, the edge of irritation. He didn't even have to imagine the conversation that would follow. He'd lived with Jenna long enough to know her rhythms. Sure enough, his phone buzzed a few minutes later. "Why didn't you tell me?" Jenna's voice was sharp, like she'd been rehearsing the question on the drive over. She stood in his doorway, arms crossed, her designer bag dangling from her wrist like a punctuation mark. Craig leaned against the doorframe, calm as ever. "Tell you what, don't play dumb." She pushed past him into the living room, her heels clicking against the hardwood. "Your birthday. You had a party. Everyone was there. Except me." Craig closed the door slowly, giving himself a moment to breathe. He'd known this was coming, but knowing didn't make it easier. "You had plans," he said simply. Jenna spun around, her eyes flashing. "Plans? Craig, you could have told me. I would have canceled." He studied her for a long moment, taking in the flawless makeup, the way her hair fell in perfect waves. She looked like someone who belonged in a magazine spread about effortless beauty. And maybe that was the problem. Jenna was effortless, but not in the way Craig needed. "You never asked," he said finally. Her brow furrowed. "Asked what?" "When my birthday was." His voice was steady, almost gentle. "In 2.5 years, you never asked." Jenna blinked, as if he'd just spoken in another language. "That's ridiculous." "Is it?" Craig shrugged. "I knew yours. Took you out both times. Made sure it was special. But you never asked about mine. Not once." She opened her mouth, then closed it again. For a second, Craig thought he saw something crack in her expression. A flicker of doubt, maybe even guilt. But it was gone as quickly as it came. "You could have told me," she said again, softer this time. Craig smiled, but it wasn't the kind of smile that reached his eyes. "I'm not going to beg someone to be curious about me, Jenna. If you wanted to know, you would have asked." The silence that followed was thick enough to choke on. Jenna stared at him like he'd just rewritten the rules of their relationship. And maybe he had. Craig didn't feel triumphant. He didn't feel vindicated. He just felt tired. Later, after Jenna left, her heels clicking like an accusation all the way down the hall, Craig sat back on the couch and stared at the ceiling. He wasn't angry. He wasn't even sad. He was just done pretending that fine for now was enough. He thought about the last 2.5 years, about the dinners he'd paid for, the weekends he'd spent waiting for her to text back, the way she always seemed to have one foot out the door. He told himself it didn't matter, that he was okay with casual, that he didn't need more. But the truth was, he did. He wanted someone who cared enough to ask the small questions. Someone who wanted to know him, not just the version that showed up for date nights, but the messy, complicated, real Craig Nichols. And for the first time in a long time, he admitted to himself that Jenna wasn't that person. Craig picked up his phone, thumb hovering over the screen. He could text Tyler, maybe grab a beer and talk it out. Or he could scroll through his dating apps, see what the world had to offer. The thought made him laugh. A short, dry sound that startled him in the quiet room. "Happy birthday, Craig," he muttered to himself, even though the day had come and gone. Here's to starting over. Chapter 2. The confrontation aftermath. Craig Nichols had always believed that silence could be a kind of mercy. Words, once spoken, had weight. They could bruise, they could scar, and sometimes they could end things that weren't ready to end. But as he sat in his kitchen the morning after Jenna stormed out, nursing a cup of coffee that tasted more bitter than usual, Craig realized silence wasn't mercy. It was avoidance. And he was done avoiding. The apartment was quiet, save for the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of the old floorboards. Craig stared at his phone on the counter, Jenna's last text glowing like a warning sign. "We need to talk." No emojis. No exclamation points. Just 5 words that carried the weight of 2.5 years. He took a slow sip of coffee, letting the heat burn his tongue. He wasn't angry at Jenna. He wasn't even angry at himself. But he was tired of waiting for something that wasn't coming, tired of pretending that fine was enough. He wanted more. He deserved more. And for the first time, he believed that. Tyler showed up 20 minutes later, because Tyler always showed up when Craig needed him, even when Craig didn't ask. That was the thing about best friends. They knew when to knock and when to barge in without knocking. "Morning, sunshine," Tyler said, striding into the kitchen like he owned the place. He was carrying a paper bag that smelled suspiciously like bacon. "You look like a man who's been dumped." Craig raised an eyebrow. "I wasn't dumped." Tyler grinned, pulling out 2 breakfast sandwiches and tossing one onto the counter. "Not yet." Craig sighed, rubbing a hand over his face. "She's mad." "Mad because you didn't tell her it was your birthday?" Tyler unwrapped his sandwich with the enthusiasm of a man who believed food could solve anything. "That's rich." Craig leaned back against the counter, arms crossed. "She said I should have told her." "And you said?" "That she never asked." Tyler froze mid-bite, then laughed so hard he nearly choked. "Oh man, you actually said that?" Craig shrugged. "It's true." "Yeah, but people don't like hearing the truth, Craig. They like hearing what makes them feel good." Tyler took another bite, chewing thoughtfully. "So what now? You gonna grovel? Buy her flowers? Write a heartfelt apology about how you failed to communicate your basic existence?" Craig smiled faintly. "No." Tyler's eyebrows shot up. "No. No," Craig repeated, his voice steady. "I'm done waiting for her to care." The words hung in the air like smoke, curling into the corners of the room. Tyler stared at him for a long moment, then set his sandwich down and leaned against the counter. "Wow," he said finally. "That's big." Craig shrugged, but the weight in his chest felt lighter than it had in months. "It's not big. It's just overdue." Tyler studied him, his expression softening. "You sure about this?" Craig nodded. "I've been sure since my birthday. Last night just confirmed it." Tyler let out a low whistle. "Well, look at you, Mr. Decisive. I'm proud of you, man." Craig laughed, the sound surprising even himself. "Don't make it weird." Tyler grinned. Too late. They ate in companionable silence for a few minutes, the kind of silence that didn't feel heavy. Craig thought about Jenna, about her perfect hair, her curated Instagram feed, the way she always seemed to be somewhere else even when she was sitting right next to him. He'd liked her. Hell, he might have even loved her once. But love wasn't enough if it was one-sided. He wanted someone who showed up, someone who asked the small questions, someone who cared enough to know when his birthday was without being reminded. And Jenna wasn't that person. By the time Tyler left, Craig had made up his mind. He wasn't going to drag this out. He wasn't going to wait for another fight, another awkward silence, another half-hearted apology. He was going to end it clean, honest, and without drama. He picked up his phone, thumb hovering over Jenna's name. For a moment, he hesitated. Not because he doubted his decision, but because endings always felt heavier than beginnings. Then he typed the words that would change everything. "Can we meet tonight?" Chapter 3. The breakup. Craig Nichols had never been good at endings. He was the kind of man who left parties without saying goodbye, who let friendships fade quietly rather than risk the awkwardness of a final conversation. But this wasn't a party, and Jenna wasn't a casual friend. 2.5 years deserved more than silence. He arrived at the cafe early, because Craig was always early. It gave him time to think, to rehearse the words he'd been turning over in his head since last night. The place was warm and bustling, filled with the comforting hum of espresso machines and soft chatter. Craig chose a corner table, the kind that felt private without being hidden, and ordered a black coffee he barely tasted. When Jenna walked in, heads turned because Jenna always turned heads. She was dressed like she'd stepped out of a lifestyle magazine. Sleek coat, perfect boots, hair cascading in glossy waves. Craig felt a pang of something, nostalgia maybe, but it passed quickly. She spotted him and smiled, but it wasn't the kind of smile that reached her eyes. It was polite, practiced, the kind you give to someone you're not sure you still know. "Hey," she said, sliding into the chair across from him. Her bag landed on the table with a soft thud. "So, what's going on?" Craig studied her for a moment, taking in the flawless makeup, the way her nails gleamed under the cafe lights. She looked like someone who had everything figured out. And maybe she did, just not with him. "I think we need to talk," he said, his voice calm, steady. Jenna laughed lightly, but it sounded brittle. "That's usually my line." Craig smiled faintly. "Guess I'm full of surprises." The silence stretched, filled only by the hiss of the espresso machine and the clink of cups behind the counter. Jenna crossed her arms, her expression sharpening. "Is this about your birthday?" she asked finally. "Because if it is, Craig, I already told you I didn't know." "That's the point," he said gently. "You didn't know. And after 2.5 years, you should." Her eyes narrowed. "So what? You're breaking up with me because I forgot your birthday?" Craig shook his head. "No. I'm breaking up with you because you never asked." Jenna blinked, as if he'd just spoken in another language. "That's ridiculous." "Is it?" Craig leaned forward, his hands clasped on the table. You've never asked about the small things, Jenna. Not just my birthday, anything. My favorite movie, the place I grew up, the name of my first dog. You never asked because you never wanted to know. Her lips parted, but no words came out. Craig pressed on, his voice soft but firm. I've been okay with that for a long time. I told myself it didn't matter, that I didn't need more. But I do. I want someone who cares enough to ask the questions. Someone who wants to know me. Not just the version that shows up for date nights, but the real me. Jenna stared at him, her expression unreadable. For a moment, Craig thought she might cry. But then she laughed, a short, sharp sound that made heads turn. You're unbelievable, she said, grabbing her bag. You're dumping me because I didn't play 20 questions? Craig didn't flinch. I'm ending this because I've been waiting for you to choose me, and you never did. The words hung between them like smoke, curling into the corners of the cafe. Jenna stood, her heels clicking against the tile like an accusation. Fine, she said, her voice tight. If that's what you want. Craig nodded. It is. She stared at him for one last, lingering moment, then turned and walked out, her coat flaring behind her like a curtain falling on the final act. Craig sat there for a long time after she left, his coffee growing cold. He wasn't angry. He wasn't even sad. He just felt lighter, like he'd been carrying something heavy for so long he'd forgotten what it was like to breathe. He pulled out his phone and texted Tyler. It's done. The reply came almost instantly. Beer? Craig smiled, the first real smile he'd felt in weeks. Beer, he typed back. And maybe wings. As he walked out of the cafe, the winter air hit his face like a promise. He didn't know what came next. Dating apps, awkward first dates, maybe even heartbreak. But for the first time in a long time, Craig felt ready. Ready to start over. Ready to find someone who cared enough to ask the small questions. Chapter 4. The lonely week. Craig Nichols had never realized how loud silence could be until he was alone in his apartment on a Friday night, staring at the blank glow of his television screen. The breakup had been clean. No shouting, no tears, no dramatic exits beyond Jenna's heels clicking like gunfire on the cafe floor. But endings, even quiet ones, left echoes. He'd told himself he was fine. He'd even told Tyler he was fine, over 2 beers and a plate of wings that tasted like freedom. And for a while, he believed it. But now, with the weekend stretching ahead like an empty highway, Craig felt the weight of it. The absence of plans, the absence of someone to text, the absence of Jenna's voice filling the spaces between his thoughts. He wasn't lonely, not exactly. He had friends. He had family. He had a job that paid the bills and a dog-eared stack of books he kept meaning to read. But there was something about Friday nights that made a man take inventory of his life. And Craig's shelves felt a little bare. Tyler, of course, had a solution. Dating apps, he said, grinning like a man who'd just discovered fire. You need to get back out there. Craig groaned. I barely know how to use Instagram. Perfect, Tyler said, shoving his phone across the table. Start with this one. It's easy. Swipe right if you like them, left if you don't. No pressure. Craig stared at the screen like it was a foreign language. Swipe right, swipe left. That's it. That's it, Tyler said. Welcome to modern romance. Craig raised an eyebrow. Romance. Tyler shrugged. Okay, modern chaos. But hey, it's fun. Craig downloaded the app that night, mostly because he didn't want to admit he was curious. The setup was simple enough: name, age, a few photos that didn't make him look like he lived in a cave. He scrolled through his camera roll, rejecting anything that featured food, blurry sunsets, or his nephew making faces in the background. Finally, he settled on 3 pictures. One from his birthday party, minus Jenna. One from a hiking trip last summer, and one where he was laughing at something Tyler had said. Felt honest, at least. Then came the bio. Craig stared at the empty text box, fingers hovering over the keyboard. What was he supposed to write? Looking for someone who knows when my birthday is? Probably not. He settled on something simple. Easygoing guy who loves good coffee, bad jokes, and hiking trails that don't try to kill me. It wasn't poetry, but it was true. The first swipe was terrifying. The second was easier. By the 10th, Craig was starting to feel like a pro, until he accidentally super-liked someone named Crystal, who described herself as a spiritual healer and part-time mermaid. Craig stared at the screen, horrified. What does that even mean? Tyler texted back instantly. It means you're about to have the most interesting date of your life. Craig groaned. I'm deleting this app. No, you're not, Tyler replied. You're living. By Sunday night, Craig had matched with 3 women and scheduled 1 coffee date for Tuesday. He wasn't sure if he was excited or nauseous. Probably both. He spent an hour debating what to wear before realizing it was just coffee, not a job interview. Still, the thought of sitting across from a stranger and trying to sound charming made his stomach twist. He missed the simplicity of old-fashioned dating, the kind where you met someone through friends or at a party, or because you both reached for the same book at the library. But maybe that was nostalgia talking. Maybe this was just how things worked now. Craig closed the app and tossed his phone onto the couch. He wasn't looking for perfection. He wasn't even looking for love. Not yet. He just wanted to feel something again. Something real. Something that didn't feel like waiting for someone else to choose him. As he turned off the lights and headed to bed, Craig felt a flicker of something he hadn't felt in weeks. Hope. Chapter 5. The coffee date. Craig Nichols had never thought a coffee shop could feel like a stage. But as he sat at a small round table near the window, waiting for his first date in years, he felt like every pair of eyes in the room was watching him rehearse his lines. He checked his watch for the third time in 5 minutes, then glanced at the door, half expecting Jenna to walk in and demand an encore of yesterday's breakup speech. Instead, the door opened to reveal a woman in a bright yellow scarf, her smile wide and unguarded. She spotted him immediately, probably because Craig had chosen the most conspicuous table in the place, and waved like they were old friends. "Craig?" she asked, her voice warm, carrying just enough confidence to make him sit up straighter. "That's me," he said, standing to shake her hand. "You must be Emily?" She laughed. "Unless you've got another date lined up, yeah." Craig smiled, relieved by her humor. "Nope. You're the only one brave enough to meet me." Emily slid into the chair across from him, unwinding her scarf like she was shedding the last bit of winter. She had an easy energy, the kind that made Craig feel less like he was auditioning and more like he was just talking. "So," she said, leaning forward, "how long have you been on the app?" Craig hesitated. 48 hours? Emily grinned. "Rookie. I've been on it for 6 months. It's like a part-time job." Craig chuckled. "Sounds exhausting." "Oh, it is," she said, rolling her eyes. "You wouldn't believe the things people put in their bios." One guy wrote, "Looking for someone who can survive the apocalypse." Like, what does that even mean? "Do I need to bring canned goods to the first date?" Craig laughed, the tension in his shoulders easing. "I matched with someone who said she was a part-time mermaid." Emily's eyebrows shot up. "Please tell me you messaged her." Craig shook his head. "I panicked and closed the app." Emily laughed so hard she nearly spilled her coffee. "You missed your chance, Craig. That could have been the love story of the century." The conversation flowed easily after that. Movies, music, the best pizza place in town. Craig found himself smiling more than he had in weeks, even when Emily teased him about his hiking photos. "So, you're outdoorsy?" she asked, sipping her latte. Craig shrugged. "I like trails that don't try to kill me." Emily grinned. "Good to know. I'm more of a walk to the fridge kind of hiker." Craig laughed, and for a moment, he forgot about the awkwardness of first dates, the weight of endings, the echo of Jenna's heels on cafe tiles. He was just a man having coffee with a woman who seemed genuinely interested in what he had to say. Of course, the universe couldn't let things go too smoothly. Halfway through their conversation, Craig reached for his cup and knocked it over, sending a wave of coffee across the table and straight into Emily's lap. "Oh my God!" Craig jumped up, grabbing napkins like a man trying to stop a flood. "I'm so sorry." Emily stared at the mess, then burst out laughing. "Well, that's one way to make an impression." Craig groaned, blotting at the table. "I swear I'm not usually this clumsy." Emily grinned, dabbing at her jeans. "Relax, Craig. It's just coffee. If this is the worst thing that happens today, we're doing pretty well." Craig looked at her, stunned by her calm. Jenna would have turned this into a federal case. Emily just laughed and kept talking like nothing happened, and somehow that made Craig like her even more. By the time they left the cafe, Craig felt lighter than he had in months. The date hadn't been perfect. He'd spilled coffee, stumbled over his words, and accidentally admitted he still owned a DVD player, but it had been real, honest, and maybe that was enough. Emily smiled as they stepped into the crisp evening air. "So, would you want to do this again sometime?" Craig blinked, surprised. "You mean, after the coffee incident?" Emily laughed. "Especially after the coffee incident. It's a good story." Craig grinned. "Then yeah, I'd like that." As he watched her walk away, scarf fluttering in the wind, Craig felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope, and maybe, just maybe, the beginning of something new. Chapter 6. The unexpected meet. Craig Nichols had never believed in fate. He believed in choices, in timing, in the quiet math of cause and effect. But as he stood in line at his favorite coffee shop on Thursday morning, 2 days after his first date with Emily, Craig started to wonder if the universe had a sense of humor. He was running late for work, his phone buzzing with reminders he was ignoring, when the woman in front of him turned around and smiled. Not the polite, distracted smile people give strangers in line. This was warm, bright, like sunlight breaking through clouds. "Sorry," she said, gesturing to the counter. "I think I ordered the last blueberry muffin." Craig blinked, momentarily thrown. "Oh, that's okay. I was going to get a bagel anyway." She laughed, a soft, melodic sound that made Craig's chest tighten, in a way he hadn't felt in years. "Bagels are a solid choice. Less risky." Craig smiled. "Risky muffins. That's a new one." Her grin widened. "You'd be surprised. I once had a muffin so dry it could have doubled as a doorstop." Craig chuckled, and for a moment, the noise of the cafe faded. The hiss of the espresso machine, the clatter of cups, the hum of conversation. It was just her and him, standing in line, trading jokes about baked goods like it was the most natural thing in the world. She stepped up to the counter, ordered her coffee, and turned back to him. "I'm Lily, by the way." Craig hesitated, then smiled. "Craig. Nice to meet you, Craig." She grabbed her muffin and coffee, then paused, her eyes lingering on his for a beat longer than necessary. "Well, good luck with that bagel." And just like that, she was gone. Out the door, scarf fluttering in the wind like a punctuation mark on a sentence Craig wasn't ready to end. He stood there for a moment, staring at the door like it might swing open again. Didn't. The barista cleared her throat, and Craig realized he was holding up the line. Plain bagel," he said quickly, though he barely tasted it when he sat down at a corner table. His mind was still on Lily, her laugh, her smile, the way she said his name like it mattered. Craig had gone on a date with Emily 2 nights ago. It had been good, better than good, even. She was funny, easy to talk to, and she'd laughed off the coffee spill like a champ. They'd agreed to meet again next week. And yet, Lily had walked into a coffee shop and turned Craig's world sideways with nothing more than a smile and a joke about muffins. He told himself it was nothing. A moment. Coincidence. But as he left the cafe and stepped into the crisp morning air, Craig felt something he hadn't felt in years. Not just hope, but possibility. The kind that made your chest ache and your pulse quicken. The kind that whispered, what if? That night, Craig sat on his couch, staring at his phone. He could text Emily, confirm their plans for next week. He could swipe through the app, distract himself with faces and bios and witty one-liners. Or he could do nothing, just sit there and wonder if he'd ever see Lily again. He laughed softly, shaking his head. "Get a grip, Nichols," he muttered. "You don't even know her last name." But deep down, Craig knew something had shifted. He didn't believe in fate. Not really. But he believed in moments. And this one felt like the start of something he couldn't ignore. Chapter 7. The second chance. Craig Nichols had convinced himself it was a one-time thing. A smile, a joke about muffins, a fleeting moment in a crowded coffee shop. He told himself not to dwell on it, not to romanticize a 5-minute conversation with a stranger whose name he barely knew. And yet, when he walked into the local bookstore on Saturday afternoon, there she was. Lily. She was standing in the aisle marked Travel and Adventure. Her head tilted as she scanned the spines of books like she was searching for a secret. Her hair was pulled back in a loose knot, a few strands escaping to frame her face. She wore a soft gray sweater and jeans, simple and effortless, and Craig felt his pulse quicken like he'd just stumbled into a scene from a movie he didn't know he was in. For a moment, he froze. He could turn around, pretend he hadn't seen her, avoid the risk of awkwardness. But something in him, something stubborn, something hopeful, pushed him forward. "Risky muffins," he said, his voice light, teasing. Lily turned, surprise flickering across her face before it melted into a smile. "Craig," she said, like she'd been expecting him all along. "Bagel guy." Craig grinned. "That's me. Though I feel like I need a better nickname." Lily laughed, and the sound was just as warm as he remembered. "What brings you here?" "Looking for a book on how to avoid spilling coffee." Craig chuckled. "That's next on my list. Right now I'm just browsing." "Same," Lily said, holding up a paperback. "Trying to decide if I'm adventurous enough for a solo trip to Italy." Craig raised an eyebrow. "Italy? That's bold." She shrugged, her smile playful. "Life's short. Might as well eat pasta in the country that invented it." Craig laughed, and for a moment the world felt smaller, simpler. Just two people standing in a bookstore, talking about muffins and pasta and the kind of choices that make life interesting. They wandered through the aisles together, trading jokes and stories like old friends. Lily told him about her job as a freelance graphic designer, her love for photography, her obsession with finding the perfect cappuccino. Craig told her about his hiking trips, his failed attempt to learn guitar, the time he accidentally joined a yoga class for senior citizens because he misread the schedule. By the time they reached the checkout counter, Craig felt something he hadn't felt in years. Not just attraction, but connection. The kind that made you want to know everything about a person, from their favorite song to the way they take their coffee. Outside, the air was crisp, the sky painted in shades of gold and pink. Lily tucked her book into her bag and turned to him, her smile soft but certain. "Well," she said, "this was unexpected." Craig nodded. "The best things usually are." She tilted her head, studying him for a moment. "You know, Craig, if you ever want to grab coffee again, without the muffin drama, I'd be up for that." Craig felt his chest tighten, but in the best possible way. "I'd like that," he said, his voice steady. Lily smiled, and for a moment, Craig thought the world might actually be conspiring in his favor. As he watched her walk away, scarf fluttering in the wind like a familiar punctuation mark, Craig felt something settle in his chest. A quiet certainty, a spark that refused to be ignored. This wasn't just a moment. It was the beginning of something real. Chapter 8. The group hangout disaster. Craig Nichols had never been the type to mix worlds. Friends were one thing, dating was another, and combining the two usually meant chaos. But when Tyler texted him about a Saturday night hangout, pizza, board games, and a healthy dose of trash talk, Craig hesitated for all of 30 seconds before replying. "Mind if I bring someone?" Tyler's response came fast. "Hell yes. Bring her. We need to see if she's real." Craig rolled his eyes but smiled. Tyler had been relentless since the breakup, teasing Craig about his mysterious coffee shop crush. And now, Craig was about to make it official. Lily was coming. Saturday night arrived with the kind of nervous energy Craig hadn't felt since high school. He'd spent an hour debating what to wear before settling on jeans and a navy sweater. Casual but not careless. When Lily showed up at his door, scarf wrapped snugly around her neck and a bottle of wine in hand, Craig felt his pulse do that ridiculous quickstep again. "You didn't have to bring anything," he said, taking the bottle. Lily smiled. "I figured wine is the universal peace offering." Craig laughed. "You've clearly met my friends." Tyler's apartment was already buzzing when they arrived. Music played low in the background, and the smell of pizza hung in the air like a promise. Tyler greeted them at the door with his usual grin, eyes flicking to Lily with barely disguised curiosity. "So this is Lily," he said, drawing out the name like it was a headline. "The Muffin Girl." Lily blinked. "Excuse me?" Craig groaned. "Long story." Tyler grinned. "Can't wait to hear it." Introductions were made, drinks were poured, and for a while everything was fine, better than fine actually. Lily fit in effortlessly, laughing at Tyler's jokes, asking questions about everyone's lives, even jumping into a heated debate about whether pineapple belonged on pizza. Craig, for the record, was firmly anti-pineapple. Lily, traitor that she was, defended it like a constitutional right. But then came the board games. Craig had forgotten how competitive his friends could be. What started as a friendly round of codenames quickly devolved into Tyler shouting clues like a drill sergeant and Lily laughing so hard she nearly fell off her chair. Craig tried to keep up, but his team lost spectacularly. And Tyler, never one to miss an opportunity, pounced. "Craig, buddy," Tyler said, clapping him on the back. "You're terrible at this. Good thing Lily's carrying you." Craig grinned, cheeks warm. "I'm just letting her shine." Lily shot him a playful look. "Sure you are." The night rolled on in a blur of laughter and chaos. At one point, someone spilled soda on the game board, and Tyler tried to fix it with a hairdryer, which only made things worse. Lily snapped a photo of the disaster, her eyes sparkling with amusement. "This is going on my best nights list," she said, showing Craig the picture. Craig smiled, and for a moment, the noise faded, the laughter, the music, the clatter of dice. It was just Lily, sitting beside him, her smile warm and unguarded. And Craig realized something he hadn't dared admit until now. He wanted more nights like this, with her. When the evening wound down and Craig walked Lily to her car, the air was cool, the streetlights casting soft halos on the pavement. She turned to him, her scarf fluttering in the breeze. "Your friends are intense," she said, grinning. Craig laughed. "They're a lot, but they liked you." Lily raised an eyebrow. "Even Tyler?" Craig smirked. "Especially Tyler. He's already planning our wedding." Lily laughed, and the sound wrapped around Craig like a promise. "Well, tell him to slow down. We haven't even had our second official date yet." Craig grinned. "How about next week?" Lily's smile softened. "I'd like that." As she drove away, Craig stood on the sidewalk, hands in his pockets, heart lighter than it had been in years. The night had been messy, loud, imperfect, and somehow, it felt like the start of something real. Something worth risking everything for. Chapter 9. The X returns. Craig Nichols had been floating on something dangerously close to happiness all week. His second date with Lily was set for Friday. A cozy dinner at a little Italian place she loved, and every time he thought about it, his chest felt lighter, like someone had cracked open a window in a stuffy room. He was humming under his breath as he unlocked his apartment door Thursday evening, juggling his keys and a grocery bag, when he saw her, Jenna, sitting on the steps outside his building like a scene from a movie Craig never wanted to star in. Her hair was perfect, as always, and her coat looked expensive enough to have its own mortgage. She stood when she saw him, her expression a mix of determination and something Craig couldn't quite name. "Craig," she said, her voice soft but sharp around the edges. "We need to talk." Craig froze, the grocery bag dangling from his hand. "Jenna, what are you doing here?" "I called," she said, stepping closer. "You didn't answer." Craig swallowed hard. "I've been busy." Her eyes flicked over him, searching for something. Guilt, regret, maybe even longing. "Busy with what?" Craig hesitated, then said the truth. "Moving on." The words landed like a stone in a still pond, sending ripples through the quiet evening. Jenna blinked, her lips parting in surprise. "Moving on? Already?" Craig set the grocery bag down, his voice calm but firm. "It's been weeks, Jenna. And honestly, I've been moving on for a while." She stared at him, her expression cracking just enough to let something raw slip through. "I didn't think you'd give up so easily." Craig shook his head. "This isn't easy, but it's right." For a moment, silence stretched between them, heavy and awkward. Then Jenna laughed, a short, brittle sound that made Craig's chest tighten for all the wrong reasons. "So that's it?" she said, her voice rising. 2.5 years, and you're just done?" Craig met her gaze, steady. "I was done the night you asked why I didn't tell you about my birthday." Her face flushed, anger sparking in her eyes. You're still hung up on that? Craig sighed. It wasn't about the birthday, Jenna. It was about everything. You never wanted to know me, and I can't keep waiting for you to care. Jenna's jaw tightened, but before she could speak, a voice cut through the tension like sunlight breaking through clouds. Craig! He turned, and there was Lily, standing a few feet away, holding a paper bag from the bakery down the street. Her smile faltered as her eyes flicked between him and Jenna, confusion settling like a shadow. Craig's stomach dropped. Of all the timing in the universe, it had to be now. Hey! Craig said quickly, stepping toward Lily. I didn't expect to see you. Lily's smile was polite, but her eyes held questions. I was just dropping off those pastries I told you about. Thought you might want them for breakfast. Craig managed a smile. That's really nice of you. Jenna cleared her throat, her voice dripping with something sharp. So this is why you're busy. Craig turned, his tone firm. Jenna? But Lily was already backing away, her smile tight. I should go. See you tomorrow? Craig nodded, his chest aching. Tomorrow, he said softly. She walked away, scarf fluttering in the wind like a fragile thread Craig was terrified of losing. When he turned back, Jenna was watching him with a look Craig couldn't quite read. Anger, yes, but something else too. Regret? Maybe. But it didn't matter. Not anymore. Goodbye, Jenna, Craig said, his voice steady. And for the first time, he meant it. As he carried the pastries inside, Craig felt the weight of the moment settle on his shoulders. Tomorrow was his second date with Lily. Tomorrow was his chance to explain, to make sure this didn't turn into a misunderstanding that unraveled everything. Tomorrow mattered. Chapter 10. The big gesture. Craig Nichols had never been the grand gesture type. He wasn't the guy who showed up with roses and a boombox, or who wrote love letters in perfect cursive. He was steady, quiet, the kind of man who believed love was built in small moments. Shared laughter, late-night talks, the way someone remembered how you took your coffee. But tonight, as he stood outside Lily's apartment with a paper bag in one hand and his heart pounding like a drum in his chest, Craig realized small moments weren't enough. Not now. Not after Jenna's ambush. Not when Lily had walked away yesterday with that polite smile that hid 1,000 questions. He needed to show her something real. Something that said, I'm here. I choose you. The bag in his hand held pastries, the same ones Lily had brought him, now returned like a promise. But that wasn't the gesture. The gesture was what sat on top of the pastries. A small notebook, its cover simple, its pages filled with Craig's handwriting. He'd started it last night, after Jenna left and the silence settled like dust. He wrote down the things Lily didn't know yet, the things Jenna never cared to ask. His favorite movie? The Princess Bride. The name of his first dog, Max. The fact that he hated pineapple on pizza but loved it in smoothies. He wrote about his hiking trips, his failed guitar lessons, the way he secretly loved cheesy romantic comedies even though he pretended to hate them. And at the end, he wrote one sentence that mattered more than all the rest. I want you to know me. Because I want to know you. Craig took a deep breath and knocked. The door opened, and there she was, Lily, in a soft sweater and jeans, her hair loose around her shoulders. Her smile was cautious, her eyes searching his face like she was bracing for something heavy. Craig, she said softly. Hi. Hi, he said, his voice steady even though his pulse wasn't. Can we talk? She hesitated, then stepped aside. Sure. Inside, the apartment was warm and cozy, filled with the faint scent of vanilla. Craig set the bag on the counter, his hands suddenly clumsy. I brought these, he said, lifting the pastries. Thought you might want them back. Lily smiled faintly. You didn't have to. I know, Craig said. But I wanted to. He handed her the notebook, his fingers brushing hers. And this. She looked down, eyebrows lifting. What is it? Craig swallowed hard. It's me. The things you don't know yet. The things I want you to know. Lily opened the notebook, flipping through the pages slowly. Her smile softened with each line, her fingers tracing the words like they mattered. When she reached the last page, her breath caught. I want you to know me, because I want to know you. She looked up, her eyes bright, her voice barely above a whisper. Craig. He stepped closer, his heart in his throat. Yesterday, when you saw Jenna, I didn't want you to think for a second that I'm not sure about you. Because I am. I'm sure. Lily blinked, and for a moment Craig thought she might cry. Instead, she laughed. A soft, shaky sound that made his chest ache in the best way. You're kind of amazing, she said, her voice warm. Craig smiled, relief washing over him like sunlight. Does that mean I get a second chance? Lily grinned, her eyes sparkling. It means you get dinner. And maybe dessert. Craig laughed, the tension melting from his shoulders. I'll take it. As they stood there, the notebook between them like a bridge, Craig realized something he'd been afraid to admit until now. This wasn't just a gesture. It was the start of something real. Chapter 11. The confession. Craig Nichols had never been good at talking about feelings. He could discuss hiking trails, movie trivia, and the merits of pineapple on pizza for hours, but when it came to the messy, fragile stuff, the fears, the hopes, the things that made his chest ache, he usually kept those locked away. But tonight, sitting across from Lily in a quiet corner of the Italian restaurant she loved, Craig knew he couldn't keep quiet anymore. The place was cozy, all soft lighting and the faint scent of garlic and basil. A candle flickered between them, casting shadows that danced across Lily's face. She looked beautiful, not in the glossy, magazine-perfect way Jenna had, but in a way that felt real. Her hair was loose, her smile easy, her laugh bubbling up like champagne every time Craig said something ridiculous. And yet, beneath the laughter, Craig felt the weight of yesterday. The notebook, the pastries, the look in Lily's eyes when she read his words. He'd made a gesture, yes, but gestures weren't enough. Not for what he wanted. So, Lily said, swirling her wine. You're full of surprises, Craig Nichols. Craig smiled. That's me. Man of mystery. She laughed softly. I liked the notebook. It was honest. Craig nodded, his throat tight. That was the point. Lily tilted her head, studying him. You know, most guys would have just sent a text. Craig chuckled. I'm not most guys. Her smile softened. I know. For a moment, silence stretched between them. Not awkward, but heavy with something unspoken. Craig took a breath, steadying himself. Lily, he said, his voice low. Can I tell you something? She set down her glass, her eyes meeting his. Of course. Craig swallowed hard. I wasn't looking for this. For you. After my last relationship, I thought I'd just coast for a while. Keep things simple. But then you walked into that coffee shop, and suddenly, simple didn't feel good enough anymore. Lily's lips parted, her breath catching. Craig pressed on, the words tumbling out like water breaking through a dam. I don't want to waste time pretending I'm okay with casual. I'm not. I want something real. Someone who cares enough to ask the small questions. Someone who wants to know me, and let me know them. And when I'm with you, I feel like that's possible. The silence that followed was thick enough to choke on. Craig's heart pounded, his palms damp against the table. He'd said too much, maybe, or not enough. He couldn't tell. Then Lily smiled. A slow, warm smile that made Craig feel like the ground beneath him had steadied. Craig, she said softly. That's probably the most honest thing anyone's ever said to me. Craig exhaled, relief washing over him like sunlight. So, you're not running for the door? Lily laughed, her eyes bright. Not even close. She reached across the table, her fingers brushing his. You want honesty? Here's mine. I wasn't looking for this either. But when I'm with you, I feel like I can breathe. Craig's chest tightened, but in the best possible way. That's all I want, he said quietly. For both of us. They sat there, hands touching, hearts open, the candle flickering like a tiny beacon in the dark. And for the first time in years, Craig felt something he'd almost forgotten, peace. And the kind of hope that didn't just whisper what if, it shouted why not. Chapter 12. The happy ending with a twist. Craig Nichols had never been a man who believed in perfect endings. Life was messy, unpredictable, full of detours and potholes. But as he stood in his kitchen on a bright Saturday morning, whisking pancake batter while Lily danced barefoot to an old jazz record, Craig thought maybe, just maybe, he'd been wrong. The past few weeks had been a whirlwind of small, perfect moments. Late-night phone calls that stretched into laughter, spontaneous coffee dates, long walks where silence felt as comfortable as words. Craig had learned things about Lily that made him smile at random times. Her obsession with crossword puzzles, her habit of humming when she cooked, the way she always ordered dessert even when she claimed she was too full. And Lily had learned things about Craig too. His love for cheesy rom-coms, his tendency to alphabetize his spice rack, the fact that he still owned a DVD player because streaming can't replace nostalgia. She teased him mercilessly for that one. Okay, Lily said now, leaning against the counter, her hair falling in loose waves. Confession time. Craig raised an eyebrow, whisk still in hand. Confession? She grinned. I hate pancakes. Craig froze mid-whisk. What? Hate them? Lily said, her smile wicked. Always have. Craig stared at her, horrified. You waited until I was halfway through making them to tell me this? I didn't want to ruin your fun, she said, laughing. You looked so determined. Craig set down the whisk, shaking his head. This is betrayal. Lily laughed harder, and Craig couldn't help but join in. Fine, he said, grabbing his keys. We're getting waffles. Non-negotiable. They ended up at a tiny diner down the street, the kind with cracked vinyl booths and a jukebox that hadn't worked since the 90s. Lily ordered waffles with strawberries. Craig ordered the same because apparently he was a pushover now. They ate slowly, talking about everything and nothing, their favorite childhood memories, the places they wanted to visit, the kind of life they hoped to build. And somewhere between bites of syrup-soaked waffles, Craig realized something that made his chest ache in the best way. He wasn't waiting anymore. Not for someone to choose him. Not for life to feel like it mattered. He was here in this booth with Lily, and that was enough. When they stepped outside, the winter air was crisp. The sky a pale blue that promised spring wasn't far off. Lily slipped her hand into his, her fingers warm against his own. So, she said, her voice soft. What now? Craig smiled, squeezing her hand gently. Now? We keep asking the small questions. Lily tilted her head, her eyes bright. Like what? Craig grinned. Like, Do you hate waffles too? She laughed, leaning into him. Not a chance. As they walked down the street, hand in hand, Craig felt something settle deep in his chest. A quiet certainty. A peace he hadn't known in years. Life wasn't perfect. It never would be. But this was real. And that was better than perfect. Chapter 13. Epilogue: The Small Questions. Spring had come to the city like a quiet miracle. Trees budding, sidewalks blooming with color. The air soft enough to make people linger outside just a little longer. Craig Nichols sat on a park bench, a paperback in one hand and a coffee in the other, watching Lily crouch near a patch of tulips with her camera. She looked up, grinning. You're terrible at smiling for pictures. Craig laughed. That's because you keep catching me off guard. Life's better that way, Lily said, snapping another photo before joining him on the bench. She tucked her camera into her bag and leaned against his shoulder, her warmth settling into him like sunlight. Craig closed his book, his fingers brushing hers. You know, he said softly, I used to think the big stuff mattered most. Birthdays, anniversaries, grand gestures. And now? Lily asked, her voice curious. Craig smiled, his chest full of something steady and sure. Now I think it's the small questions. Lily tilted her head. Like what? Craig grinned. Like, do you still hate pancakes? She laughed, the sound bubbling up like champagne. Absolutely. Craig chuckled, pressing a kiss to her temple. Good. More waffles for us. They sat there, watching the world move around them. Kids chasing kites, dogs tugging at leashes, the hum of life unfolding in 1,000 tiny ways. Craig thought about the man he'd been months ago, the man waiting for someone to choose him, the man who thought love was something you earned by being patient enough. And he thought about the man he was now, the man who'd learned that love wasn't about waiting. It was about showing up, asking the small questions, choosing every day to care. Lily reached for his hand, her fingers lacing through his. Ready to go? She asked. Craig smiled, standing with her. Always. As they walked away, the park bathed in golden light, Craig felt the quiet certainty settle deep in his chest. Life wasn't perfect. It never would be. But this was real. And that was better than perfect.